Thanks, Dave. Um, and thanks, Anna, for asking me to do this. And I love you. Like you saw some things in me in the beginning that I didn't really see in myself. And I think it's really important to have people like that in our lives that can see that in us when when we can't quite see it ourselves. It helps us begin to map out a future of a potential that's so important. Um, yeah, I had an opportunity to speak at a convention a couple months ago, and that gave me a lot of opportunity to reflect on my journey, and then having this opportunity today too. I'm just glad to be here with you all. So, um, I just remember from an early age that something was amiss, that something just wasn't right. Not right with the world, but inside me. Like I felt really anxious all the time, that I wasn't enough in some way, shape, or form. That And I was always constantly trying to manipulate my external environment to make me feel okay, that and shield parts of me. I just had a lot of anxiety and fear, just wasn't like there was anything that happened that caused that anxiety and fear. I just feel like I came out of the womb with anxiety and fear, and but we're so adaptable, I was so adaptable that I developed these strategies and these coping mechanisms, to deal with this, the anxiety and fear. Um, that eventually, they weren't sustainable. It just was not sustainable for me to try to protect pieces of myself that I thought you might judge. I was just constantly on this boundary between me and you of saying, oh, this you'll accept this piece of me, but you won't accept that piece of me. Um, and and that just separated me from the world, and from interacting with it, just constantly trying to structure, who you saw of me. And, it affected my relationships. I was very, I was very, I was strategic in who I built relationships with because I wanted to make sure that, I was protected, that I wasn't made fun of, that I didn't stand out too much. I managed my appearance in that way, shape, or form to not stick out, to not look different, to just blend in. My ability to kind of even succeed in a drive to, excel in things was part of that as well. To just not be singled out, to just kind of blend in, not make too much noise, but not be, too on the other side of the fringe either. Like it was just this constant balance, And I was talking with my mom, my sister about it recently, and my sister was like, "Man, no wonder you were always so tired." And I was like, yeah, I guess that I never thought of it that way, but it makes sense. So that started at an early age. And then, and then I found substances, and that it was magical for me. It really was. It made me feel right and okay in a way that I never felt before. And originally it kind of felt like it connected me to the world, but eventually it was something that, it just caused me to escape further and further. It actually added more to my anxiety and fear, and I really, I lived like that, really for the next 32 years, in and out of using substances, off and on, trying to find other things that would work, get lost in relationships, or maybe find a good relationship, or I'd get involved at school and then I drop out of school, and then I just one end of the spectrum or another, never to find like my way through, because I was never enough. It was just never enough, and I was trying to cover something up. And substances really, again, it gave me a solution. These things were solutions at first. A lot of things that I did were solutions, but ultimately they became my problems. But I wasn't willing to accept that either. I really wasn't willing to accept the thing that was a solution for me, that helped me deal with this world, was now a problem. And that became a problem, not willing to accept that. So, I mean, I had legal issues, jail time, marriage, divorce, had a son, then got estranged from him, had businesses, lost businesses, had financial success, became homeless, mental health. Like, this is my journey. It's a lot of different stuff, and I can get lost in the weeds on it, but I just kind of want you to understand a little bit about, what the 32 years for me was like, with my active addiction, and how it manifested itself. And then I want to get to the point where, I came out of it, which really happened, the beginning of it really like 5 years ago, and I got shot by a friend of mine. We were both addicts together, and he went down a deep dark hole, and he saw me as an enemy. It was over some petty things. And he drove by, and it was 4th of July weekend of 2017. He shot me in my driveway. The bullet hit my elbow, went underneath my armpit, straight into my spine. I was instantly paralyzed. And how a bullet travels from here to here, and doesn't hit anything major, because I ended up laying on my driveway for 10 hours until 7 o'clock the next morning before somebody found me. If it hits my aorta, I bleed out in 14 minutes or less. Instead, I laid there for 10 hours before anybody found me. And, and that night, I was awake probably 5 hours of it. And I went, at first I was like, oh no, I'm not going to be able to, drive out to California and hang out with my girlfriend tomorrow too. Oh no, this is the end of your life, Chad. And I had a long time to think about, my life and the people in it, and just a lot of different things in that 5 hours, that ran through my head, until I finally shut my eyes and thought this was the end. This was the end. And the next time I opened my eyes, there were a few law enforcement officers standing over me, and I was just like, oh, this isn't heaven. Oh no, what's going on here? And I was like, I was shot. They're like, you were shot. There was only a pool of blood like this big underneath me, after laying there 10 hours, and I was like, yeah, this is who shot me. And but I was instantly paralyzed, pretty much from below my sternum down. I have nothing. I still have nothing. I'm a paraplegic. And, you know, it was my addiction that got me in that situation. I mean, I didn't deserve to be shot. I don't think anybody really does, but it was the result of my actions and my active addiction that got me there, but I was not willing to accept that. I really wasn't. And it took me, a while to come to terms with that. In fact, trying to lie to myself about that led me further into my addiction. I didn't want to accept my truth. I didn't want to accept it was my choices. I wasn't willing to look at that. And it just drove me into a deeper, darker hole. And using substances in the chair was a whole new ball game. It took me down a deeper, darker hole. I found depression on a level that I'd never experienced it before. My anxiety on a level that I'd never experienced it before. And I kind of met my injury head on physically. I was doing really well in terms of, managing my new life with a spinal cord injury, but I hadn't, emotionally begun to come to terms with it. And when I got sick and I lost all my strength, and I was living in my mom's basement, and I really began to, sink deeper into a darker hole, because I was like, wait a second, I met this injury head on. I had all these parameters of, if I do this, then I should get this. If I show up in this way, then the world should give me this back. I was constantly making these agreements, and I felt like, since I've met my injury head on, I should have been rewarded with something more than being sick and reduced to, I couldn't even transfer. I couldn't even move. I was just in this bed alone with my thoughts about how unfair the world was, how horrible things were, how things were always going to be this way. It was never going to end. It was going to keep getting worse. And if anybody has struggled with, depression and those obsessive thoughts that just keep coming and coming and coming, they take over. They take over. They have a momentum. And each thought takes me deeper, into a darker hole, followed by the next thought and the next thought. And this went on for a period of probably 2 to 3 weeks. It seemed like an eternity because every day was just a new version of hell for me. And I woke up one morning. I mean, you wake up with this. I mean, you go to sleep with this, you wake up with this. It's just there. It's heavy. It's always there. And I woke up one morning, and and I just okay, just waiting for these thoughts to start in, and it was silent, and I was just like, what's going on? Where, like there's not silence in my head. It's always self-defeating negative talk. Where is this talk? And it wasn't coming. And all this thought comes in from left field, and it was like, what if you decide to have a good day today? And I was like, what? And it was like, what if you decide to kick today's ass instead of letting today kick your ass? And I'm like, what? I mean, it was like, it was so out of left field. Like I mean, it sounded different in my head, like there was something different about this thought, not only that it was positive, but just the way it even sounded in my head. And immediately I started thinking about what I had to be grateful for. This is strange. I mean, here I am coming off of 2 to 3 weeks of just hell. And then I wake up and all of a sudden these two thoughts come in and I'm saying, what can I be grateful for? You know, if that's not some level of spirituality or higher power, I'm not quite sure what is. But and I immediately wrote 2 gratitude letters to my mom and my sister. Writing gratitude letters was not a practice I'd experienced or done before. It's not like I had this in my arsenal. I was like, oh, let's go to this if you get depressed, Chad. No, it wasn't like that at all. It's like these were thoughts that came from beyond me, but also from me at the same point. So I did this. And then I told my mom, I said, we need to go to Walmart and we need to get one of those big desk calendars, those big desk calendars. And because I need a big visual of when I kick the day's ass. And so I got this desk calendar and I got like these markers and crayons. And I did this like elementary school project where every day that I kicked the day's ass, I put an X on the day and I had that calendar on my wall so I could see it. When I was in bed, I could look at this calendar and see it. And I got this visual of every day that I kicked the day's ass. And that's the kick ass calendar that, Dave and Anna have talked about, So, but I needed that visual. Like, and I don't know, why did I need the visual? I don't know. Why did I know that I needed the visual? Why did I want to get a desk calendar and markers? Like, all this stuff is so, bizarre looking back on it, like where this comes from, So it'd be nice to say that, oh, from that point forward, my life got better. Not the case. Not the case. I didn't have opportunities to use substances through my injury until I did. And I started using again. And I got back into that, and using in the chair was a whole other level of just problems with a spinal cord injury, managing my bladder and bowel and different things that I had to deal with. And so it got worse. And then I ended up getting into a rehabilitation facility called QLI in Omaha, where I got to do 3 months of rehab there. And these people taught me how to treat myself, treated me with a dignity and respect that modeled how I could treat myself, showed me how to open my mind to a new way of living, how life could be with a spinal cord injury, how I could still dream, how I could still achieve things. Very spiritually principled, oriented concepts of how to live in this world that I found at QLI, that I found in 12-step programs, that I found in other places. Like, these spiritual principles are great because they work everywhere, as long as I use them spiritually. Anybody can use them. And I can find them in different parts. It's not like there's just one area of my life where I'm like, oh, this is where I go to get, spiritual principles. Like, I find different areas where this manifests throughout the world, and then I just gravitate toward that. But then I got two really bad pressure sores. They went septic on me. I had to lay in a bed for 4 months. And I still had not really surrendered to my disease. I still had not really surrendered to my addiction and how it manifests. Like I knew it was a problem, but I wasn't really willing to fully face it, you know. And these little things like the kick-ass calendar and my experience at QLI and other different things began to kind of like open me up. It like cracked this door for me. You know, it started opening this door just a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more until I'm laying in a bed for 4 months and I'm starting to really think that, you know, Chad, there's something you're really not getting right about this living thing. There's something that you seriously are not understanding, you know? And I began looking at things a little bit differently and thinking things like I joke that, you know, I was, you know, how you put a kid on timeout, you know, when they're acting up and you like sit down and think about what you've done and whatever. And my joke was, well, you know, God put me on a permanent timeout. I permanently have to sit down for the rest of my life and think about how, you know, how I've got this thing wrong and how can I figure out how to get it right, you know? So I started doing that, and then I got out. I got home. I had an apartment. Was living by myself, and I got home from the hospital after those 4 months, and I had some drugs left in my apartment, and um, and I couldn't throw them away. Like I I I couldn't get rid of them. I thought that that just was not an option for me as an addict. As long as I was, I could not get rid of them, and so I had to do them. But I did them to get them away from me. Like I wasn't doing it to try to because I really wanted to. I had to get it gone. I had to get it away. I felt this sense of that this was going to kill me, and I didn't really want to die, but because of my mental thought process, I had to get it away from me, and the only way I could do it was to do it. So I did it, and then I began a deep dive into what the spinal cord injury meant to me, into nutrition, diet, exercise, meditation, you know, breath work. Um, and I was at my home for, you know, pretty much 4 months other than leaving for doctor's appointments, you know, and it was like um, I was deprived of relationships. I was deprived of connection. I was deprived of moving my physical body in a way that I used to be able to move through the world. I was deprived of distracting myself in certain ways. I was deprived of the substances. Like I was deprived on all these levels that I never was before, nor I don't know if I could have like if I could have created an environment like that for myself without a spinal cord injury. Like because I wanted to reach out to people. Like I wanted people in my life. I wanted to distract myself from what was really going on inside me. I really wanted to use anything outside of myself to do that, but I couldn't. I really couldn't. I was at home in my apartment by myself, alone, and I didn't want to keep doing the things that I was doing before, and I wanted to change. And the only thing I knew to do was try to learn how to change. And so I began learning about what that process was for me. And I began, you know, meditating and doing, you know, I woke up every day with, you know, I'd have headaches and I'd feel miserable and I'd be, you know, like, man, I don't know how this is going to work, you know, and I do these breathing exercises that would help kind of reframe my mind. And I, you know, and to be an anxious person, to learn how to meditate, um it's it's to sit and think about your life when your life is not that good is not very. I don't know if that'd be considered malpractice to recommend that somebody would do that. I'm not sure, but for me, I did it, and I began to develop this relationship with my mind. I began to understand how I thought, why I thought the things that I thought, the momentum of my thinking, um, what things made me think certain things, and how I felt. And and just noticing this, because I don't know, meditation, like some people get this. I feel like when I try to bring it up to people, that's kind of like some of their eyes glaze over and they've heard about it, but they can't do it. And really for me, it's about paying attention. What do I want to pay attention to? You know, what do I want to actually pay attention to? Whether that's if I'm in front of my son, being able to pay attention to that conversation and that moment with him. If I'm over, working with spinal cord injury people, being present in that moment, paying attention to that. Thoughts that come through my head. What do I want to pay attention to? Which thoughts do I want to pay attention to? Which ones do I want to just let go by? Like meditation for me is about learning how to pay attention, and just cultivating what I want to pay attention to. Um, and so I was doing those things, like I said, quite a few months before I ended up, getting led to a 12-step program where then I began getting a sponsor, and working the steps and learning again more about Chad and who Chad was and these spiritual principles like I talk about that I learned at QLI. I didn't know that's what they were until I got into my 12-step program and I started realizing, oh, these principles of like honesty and open-mindedness and willingness that they talk about, like, oh, that's what was happening here. The more I accept the truth about the reality that's around me, the closer I am to the present moment and to dealing with who I am, and how I can, be in this world, and I struggled a lot with like having you know, with having a higher power. I think a connection with something like for me, higher power is a connection to something that's larger than me, but it's also a connection to who I am. It's also a connection to Chad and who Chad is like on the inside. Like it's not just something completely outside of me, it's also inside of me. Um, but I had some preconceived notions about this higher power thing that I struggled with. But if I wanted to be open minded and willing, like it was suggested that I do, if I'm using a preconceived notion to prevent me from growing or learning, am I being open minded and willing? Like, am I doing that? So it's like for me, the spiritual principles are a lot about, using them and practicing them even when I don't want to, you know, um, I feel like my addiction was very downstream of what my problem was. My problem was all the anxiety and fear and feeling not enough and all that happened, from a very early age. But then how that manifested in terms of what did I try to do to fill that? And the longer I'm on this journey, the more I realize like what is a sustainable action that I can do and what's something that's unsustainable. So for me, it's unsustainable to use a relationship to fill this inside me. It's unsustainable to use a substance to fill what's inside of me. It's unsustainable to use all sorts of things that I'm finding. It's unsustainable for me to binge Netflix to fill what's inside of me. You know, um, there's many ways that my addiction manifests itself outside using substances today. You know, um, and what's sustainable? Well, it's sustainable to try to you know to be open and honest with myself about what's really going on. It's sustainable to work the steps of the 12-step program. It's sustainable for me to meditate and connect and keep learning. I mean, I have this incessant desire and thirst to learn. Like I want to keep learning about, I learn a lot about the brain and a lot about the body, and then I take that information and I say, what does that mean to me? Not just like, okay, this is what it means in a book for like humankind, but what does it mean for Chad? What does it mean, if I do this, how does it really affect me? So I've kind of become my own like mad scientist and lab rat at the same time. I'm constantly, running experiments with and paying attention to what works and what doesn't. But I can't do any of that if I'm in my active addiction. If I'm using substances, I can't pay attention to anything other than continuing to go back to that thing to get relief. My emotional safety and security and feeling enough is, and I think probably always will be, my number one thing that I'm trying to solve. but finding things that can sustainably help solve that is is my goal. And the fact that I can pay attention, like I can make mistakes today, right? Like I can start something in a routine and it doesn't work, and I can listen to that and pay attention to it and then change. That's a gift. I couldn't do that. I couldn't make a mistake before, because if I've made a mistake before, I'm a worthless human person and I suck and I'm horrible, and I can't, there's no way out of that. But today I can let go of that rigidity, and everything, and I can allow myself to make a mistake, and I can learn from it, and I can learn about, patterns and cycles and things that are familiar, because obviously my addiction was something that is easy to see, how using a drug didn't help me, but what was underlying using that drug that didn't help me? What was my anxiety and fear that was going on there, and how um how like natural that anxiety and fear was. Even if I could say I didn't like it, it was familiar. I was used to it. So there's a lot of cycles that I'm learning about that are very ingrained in me, that I'm used to, that are familiar, that I'm trying to rewrite, and I'm trying to change so that I can change, because I could just remove the drug or the substance, still have the anxiety and fear, and then binge Netflix, find a relationship, use something else that tries to fill this, but it doesn't, it does not make me feel any better. So the gift of being able to pay attention to those things and learn about those has been important. And then reframing what a mistake is. Um, a mistake is an okay thing. I can learn from a mistake, you know. Um, Learning, making things very binary about, is this a decision for my recovery or is this a decision for my addiction? I can break everything down into that. I can make decisions on a daily basis and see, what is this feeding, and it's feeding one or the other. um, and just learning what that is. Also, facing the struggle, learning to like going toward the struggle, going toward the fear, going toward the anxiety. um, Learning to sit with my anxiety and what's it telling me. I mean, being in a chair and then going out in social environments did not decrease my anxiety. Like, it increased it tenfold, you know? So I'm like going to my nephew's basketball games and I got to sit in a different park than everybody else. And I feel like everybody's looking at me, and I just wanted to run and I couldn't handle the thoughts. And if I left that situation and didn't go back, it would never get better. The only thing that made it better was to continue to go to those games, continue to feel that anxiety, continue to face that fear. And then eventually, over time, it got a little bit less and a little bit less and a little bit less and a little bit less, until it gets to the point where now I can go 3 years later. And for the most part, I don't feel that anxious. But I also, you know, in my head, I'm always conscious of, what are my priorities here? Is my priority here to not be anxious, or is my priority here to connect with my family and be here for my nephew? And if I can tweak that and understand what the priority is, then I can sit through that anxiety and that fear. Because my priority used to be, get rid of the anxiety and the fear, whatever you have to do, Chad, get rid of that. But now, if I'm honest with myself, what's my priority? Well, my priority is to be a part of my family. My priority is to be an uncle. My priority is to be a father. And through that stuff, there's discomfort. There's discomfort. And finally, in my life, being able to not be rushing to change my discomfort, but actually be rushing toward spiritual principles, towards connection, toward family, toward things that are important for me, has been a huge thing. But it doesn't, I don't want to, it doesn't take away the anxiety and the fear, but it reframes it, and I establish a different relationship with it, and I'm able to sit in that. And then over time, it's like, oh, anxiety and fear, here you are, my old friends. Oh yes, I know who you are. I know what you're like. And I really do establish a dialogue like that with things that go on with me. It helps me. Humor is huge for me. I have to be able to laugh and to see things in a different way. Um, and just figuring out, what I wanted out of life for the first time, So it wasn't until, my mid 40s when I was finally like, what do I really want to do with my life, and really being intentional about what those priorities are and then going after it, in spite of anxiety and fear. It's not that it's not, even therapists will say it. We don't make the world less anxious and fearful for people that have problems with that. We increase their courage to face those things, you know? Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm not really sure where else I could go from here. I'm sure I could keep talking forever, but I have a zest for life now that it's like when struggle comes, there's a moment where there's an instinct of I don't want this, but I've been reframing it for a long enough period of time that it's like, what are you here for? What are you here to teach me? I'm redefining a lot of different things in my life that way, but I can't get there from here. Like I can't say, oh, I want to, because I used to do that. Like I want my life to be better, and then tomorrow it's not better, so I quit. Well, I can't fix things overnight, but over time, if I focus on something, I can fix anything. Anything. I firmly believe that we are so much stronger than we give ourselves credit for. Um, and I had to learn it in a deep dark hole, and I also got help in that deep dark hole from whatever people want to label it, that came from outside of me, that gave me thoughts that I didn't normally think and actions that I didn't normally perform, and the courage to do those things. Um, it's been an amazing journey, and I'm so excited to see like where it goes from here. And every time I get to a goal, every time I get to a point where I'm like, this is what I want to achieve, in my head comes this thought of, this is just the beginning. This is just the beginning, you know? Turning toward the struggle and fear and the anxiety and whatever it is that you're facing, like the only way out is through, you know?